Hello dear chess lovers and chess experts. I, expert in the site Chessbook.com Grandmaster Sergei Shipov, am wishing you a happy new year of chess. By a long-time tradition, the first super tournament of the year takes place in the small Dutch town of Akenzie. In the tournament A, in my mind, Carlsen is the main favorite. So let's take a look at this first round game, Carlsen-Radjabov. The Sicilian defense. Timur didn't risk to play the dragon variation. Looks like the current situation of the analysis has again changed to be advantageous for white after the game Radjabov-Kasimdzhanov, which happened in the Lista in 2008. I actually had the pleasure of observing this game with my own eyes during the FIDE Grand Prix tournament in the Lista. A surprising answer and the most weighty one, an unusual order of moves. Timur questioned himself a record-breaking short amount of time here. He's using the opponent's delay to take over the center. A cruel counteraction. The perspective for white is very pleasant. In the battle with the isolated pawn d5, the bishop g2 can't be more useful. What should black do? The unpleasant fact is that he has to spend a tempo to develop the bishop f8, after which white will immediately trade the pawns on c5, forcing the bishop to make a move once more. The most principal argument. With the pressure on the pawn d4, Radjabov is trying to force the capturing d4 takes c5 with the bishop still on f8, so winning a very important tempo for development that way. Judging from Radjabov's long thought process here, he didn't study this move in the morning. Timur stepped off the principal path. He is still spending the tempo for the extra move on the king's side bishop, but with it there's no sense playing bishop g4. Knight f6 was obviously better here, so it's not surprising that the move bishop e7 hasn't been seen in practice yet. Of course, white has an advantage in development. Compare the king's positions and good starts of an attack in the center. Now the knight f3 will be free in movement, and the queen, by the way, is looking at c3 with the double attack on the bishop c5 and pawn g7. The poor bishop can't stop moving. A logical development of the idea. It is exposing the ineffectiveness of the bishop on g4. Black is barricading the e-vertical so that he could calmly castle, but he won't get that calmness. White isn't going to slow down. Yes, correct. The initiative is still obviously on white's side. The bishop g2 is working harder than ever before, and white is pressuring. Timur is going straight to the threat. Castling here instead of rook c8 would have been bad, but rook c8, c takes d4. Here, bishop h6 would have been too early, so c takes d4, knight takes d4, d5. A key moment of the opening battle. Bishop h6, eye-catching but not effective. The idea is simple: develop the bishop with the attack on the pawn g7 and lead the rook to d1. Here, instead of bishop h6, much stronger would have been bishop takes d5, bishop takes d5, bishop h6, and here black has no choice. He has to castle, and rook d1, bishop f6, and so on, with clear advantage for white. But none of this happened. We saw bishop h6 and knight takes c5. Here, more tenacious would have been bishop f6, but knight takes e5, rook d1. The bishop is under attack, white is a piece down, and he's still calmly finishing the development. Beauty is a dangerous power. Timur is right. The specific circumstances give an opportunity to walk away from a non-perspective game. Changing the order of moves here would have been impossible. If knight takes d5, then knight d7, and black suddenly has an extra bishop. But queen takes e5, bishop f6. Black has a small but a strong card, the dark squared bishop without an opponent. By the way, the extra piece is still on the board. Queen e2, but the pin with the knight on d5 doesn't leave hopes to stay with an advantage. We have to return the material. Well, strong cards are needed exactly for that, to compensate for the opponent's strong cards. The trade in center decrease white's potential for attack. Black get a real chance to defend. Exactly, everything else doesn't give much of a problem for black. Timur decided to minimize the complications of the calculations, which is understandable with the lack of time. Looks like the best practical chance. A very bold decision. Timur is forcing to trade of the bishops without being embarrassed about the trapped king. I can feel the big amount of work with the computer here. People of the past generations instead would have played here castling, which would keep the advantage for white. But rook c5. Of course, the move of the queen of the board would have left no hopes for a win for white. Finally, the big black king could run away from the burning center. Now the new phase of the game is starting, the pawn game. But the weakness of the black king side is still playing its role. White still has the initiative. If black could trade the pawn a2, then the save would become realistic. The white pieces are coming out to the open space, though through the center then can come to visit the black king, and after really scaring him, win the pawn b6. And here's the promised movement to the center. Now the pawn b6 is under attack, and at the same time the rook on f8 is under attack as well. The black king on h8 looks vulnerable, but I can't see a concrete way to get to it yet. A kid's trap and a mature answer. If2 rook c4, rook takes c4, then queen f8 mate. So instead rook e8, rook e4. Looks like Carlsen started messing up here. Of course, the repetition of moves is beneficial for Radjabov. The saving control time became 2 moves closer. Black is holding on to the defense of the 8th row. Yeah, for now, simplifying the position isn't desirable. Timur is just standing still. Black's castle is quite strong. Magnus couldn't come up with serious problems for the opponent. White is bringing up the square b4 for the rook. Besides the attack on the pawn b6, I can't think of anything else. No one would play this position with 2 rooks. On the other hand, even with 4 rooks, there aren't any chances. I want to turn your attention to the fighting spirit of the Norwegian chess player. On the other hand, he can be understood. He missed a huge advantage and is not ready to say goodbye to hope just yet. Black is threatening with the trade of the rooks, which will kill everything. Carlsen is very careful right now. Now Radjabov is just going to stand still. The king hit, now is the time to activate the rooks. Oh, so that's what it is. Looks like Magnus is planning to slowly but surely push the pawns. Timur is calm and quick. It's important to protect the pawn f4 to lately quickly play g4. A demonstration of calmness. The white king is weaving the mating net for the black king himself. In the following battle, the weakness of the pawn h6 can become crucial. Black is having real problems. When white puts a pawn on each of f5, g4, and h4, his rooks will successfully enter black's camp and come up with real threats. The first move to the planned pawn structure. A small trick. A threat of mate on 1. Carlsen is staying concentrated. If here to h4, followed an elegant blow, rook g5 check, hg5, rook h3 mate. So instead, king h4, rook b6, h3, rook b3. An excellent defense idea. The pressure on the pawn h3 should contain white. An entertaining picture. 5 pieces are biting at the pawn h3. As soon as white moves the long-awaited h5, black will attack g4. The resources of the battle are finished. Draw. A short summary of the game. Carlsen classically trapped the opponent on an unknown variation. Radjabov passed by the well-known pass and ended up under strong attack. In the later sharp battle, the Azerbaijani grandmaster was luckier than the Norwegian one. He amazingly repelled all of white's attacks. I also want to turn your attention to move number 14 by white. It is very beautiful, but the trade on d5 should have been done before it. Then the win would be quite realistic. Thank you for your attention. Again, for you was working Grandmaster Shipov. We'll see you tomorrow.